was what level of tsar and what type of knot were we discussing. Yesterday we saw that the Goyim, the Chavos Yair, they learned that it's talking about any knot which is an Issa D'Rabbanan type of knot, meaning it's not an Uman's knot, but it might be for a time period, or if it's an Uman's knot, which is made to be opened that day, so then that's a D'Rabbanan knot, and it's Mutter b'makom tsar, and this is the regular sugya of tsar, which we find all over the place, that b'makom tsar, there is a heter to do D'Rabbanans. But we saw yesterday that many Achreinim, the Chayodam, the Graz, the Aruch HaShulchan, they learn, the Chazon Ish certainly, they learn that this is something specific, dafka about our sugya of kesher agabe kesher. Since we're dealing with a knot on a knot, just a double knot, just a just a regular type of double knot, which is something that it's a big chiddush to say that that's considered an uman's knot, because this is something, number one, that everybody could do, so it's not clear. Even the Rambam would consider that to be an uman's knot. And number two, Rashi would certainly hold its mutter. Rashi will hold that it's all dependent on Zman, and therefore Rashi would hold its mutter. And even in the Rambam, it's only a suffix. So we saw it's a sfeika, and therefore we're machmir, but we're not machmir b'makom tsar. But we saw that the Graz, the Til David learns the Graz, that therefore the level of tsar that we require to be matir is not the same level of tsar of the regular dinim of all these Surah D'Rabbanan. And tsar in this type of sugya doesn't mean tsar of, great pain. And it means even possibly annoyance. We saw possibly that's enough, that if something is annoying, ad kedei kach, I don't think it means a tsar that, he wants to wear his Shabbos shoes. If they get tied into a double knot, he wants to wear, let's say he went and tied a double knot in Erev Shabbos, and now he's not going to be able to wear his Shabbos shoes. He's going to have to wear weekday shoes. So I guess it depends on your weekday shoes. If your weekday shoes are reminiscent of some oversized basketball player, so then it could be that's enough of a tsar and a busha. Taisus and Shabbos and Daf Nun brings down that there's no greater tsar than the tsar of being embarrassed to walk amongst people. So therefore, if you're going to have shoes that people are going to think you're some type of a hoodlum or some type of a gangster or something like that, because you're wearing these types of shoes on Shabbos, so then that far, vadal chayr is a makom to be makel. Once you have this Graz and this Aruch HaShulchan that say that the whole entire meaning that we're machmar and tying a double knot is not b'makom tsar, obviously the level of tsar is going to be a lesser level of tsar. And like I said yesterday, there'd be a makom to be makel. Exactly how to apply it in each case, you'd have to don. We saw that, for example, to tie a double knot in a shoelace of a child so that the kid shouldn't fall. That'd be another example of where there might be a makom to be makel. Again, it's probably better if you don't have to be saimach on these coolers, because it's seemingly quite a big cooler. That was Adkan, what I spoke about yesterday. Now, the Maisa, there's one more part of the sugya that we have to go into, which is a very common case, which is very related to when a double knot gets tied on its own. But before we go into that, I wanted to mention something which is very time friendly. It's quite time, very negaya, the Zman that we're about to go into, the Zman of Yom Kippur and the Zman of Sukkot. And it's the shayla that we've mentioned before, but today I'd like to bring the rayas. The shayla we spoke about is what's a din if a person ties a knot and he doesn't really want the knot to last, but the knot doesn't ever have a necessity for more than a certain amount of time. What do I mean? The garbage knot, like we explained, he has a garbage bag, he ties a double knot, not a single knot, he ties a double knot. But really, the only reason he ties a double knot is just because he needs the top to be closed so that by the time it gets down the street, it doesn't go all over the street. And by the time he's going to get to the garbage, he doesn't really care what happens to this knot. What's that called? Here you have a knot which is going to be opened, which is never going to be opened. But when I tied the knot, I did not tie it b'dafka la'olam. So do we say, this is like ad shebalui? Mishnah Berurah told us that when you tie a knot for the duration of the time of that item, that's already called la'olam. Now we saw that Mishnah Berurah is really a very big kula, because the Mishnah Berurah goes la'olam, he's going in the tzara kula. Mishnah Berurah goes la'olam means not a year, not 6 months. Once there's a time limit, it's no longer la'olam. It's not a deraisa according to Mishnah Berurah. So that we saw, the Mishnah Berurah shita is that la'olam means without a limit. Yet, the Mishnah Berurah said that if you're doing it for the duration of the item, that's also called without a limit. So we saw if a person's going to have a pair of sweatpants and he's going to tie a double knot, and he's never going to take that knot out. Now, these sweatpants are not going to last light and bud, but they're going to, the knot is going to last for the duration of the usage of the sweatpants, which could be 40 years, it could be 40 days. So that's going to still be considered l'olam. That's what we saw in Mishnah Berurah. So how do we look at the garbage knot, the knot on the bag of a garbage bag? It's a knot that is going to be there till the end of the usage that you have in this garbage bag, which is basically maybe 5 minutes. You're just tying the knot, the double knot, and then you're going to the garbage. Yet it's a knot that's going to last for a very, very long time. On the other hand, you have no need in that knot. So do we say that it's not like the case of the sweatpants? Because there, I have the need of this knot to last indefinitely. What's the indefinite need of this knot? Because I want that the knot should be your kol zman that the pants are in usage, which is an indefinite amount of time, and that's considered la'olam. Mashenkin, when it comes to the garbage bag, I don't care that this knot should exist once it hits point B, once it hits the garbage. And the truth is, I just want the knot right now so that it can get to point B. So what's that? Is that called a la'olam dikanat? It's till the entire usage of the garbage bag. The entire usage of the garbage bag is until it gets to the garbage, and that's called ad shabali. Or do we say no? That's considered a deraisa dikanat at all. That's considered a knot with a hagbala. That's considered the time period that I just wanted to get there. You never plan on opening that knot. That's a shaila. We would have ourselves, if we had to dime this shaila on our own, I think we would have said like the Avnei Nezer says. The Avnei Nezer is not in those simanim, it's somewhere else. The Avnei Nezer is in Siman Chavav. And the Avnei Nezer says, it should be totally in the regular machlekes of malacha shein tzricha legufa. If you hold that a malacha shein tzricha legufa is a chayiv, so here, why are you tying this knot? You're tying this knot not for the purpose of being there la'olam. So it's going to be there la'olam, but you don't need it to be there la'olam. Mashenkin, if you hold malacha shein tzricha legufa as pater, so then you would say this case is pater. L'chayra chashav shel kayama. He says, it's kayama because you don't plan on opening it. The machar yizraik, he's going to just throw it into the garbage. And he doesn't plan on ever opening it. But the maisa ain't sarcha kesher. I mean, maisa only needs it for 5 minutes. So then it's a malach shein tzricha legufa, and Reb Shimon would poiter. That's how the Avnei Nezer says, and maybe that's what we ourselves would have said. But the Mardiskin in the Kunchit Achron and Siman Hay has gewaltig rate over here to try and explain the Makoros of this shaila. There is a Gemara in Yuma Daf Samach Zayin, which everybody knows. The Gemara talks about over there that when they would send out the Sir Lazazel, that's the little goat that would be mechaper on Klal Yisrael. When they would send them out, so they would tie a piece of the string on the rock before they throw him off, and they would tie the other half of that string on his horns. The Paiskim, the Rishayim, they take on that we're talking about tying a regular knot. Now that itself is debatable. How'd you know that we're talking about a regular knot? Maybe it's talking about an aniva. Okay, but Akapanim, I guess it says the word kosher bein shnei karnov. It should have said oynev bein shnei karnov. I don't know. Then they take this goat and unsuspectingly, and then they throw him off the cliff. So the halacha is that it doesn't seem to say anywhere that, part of the avodas Yom Kippur, which is doicha Yom Kippur, which is doicha Shabbos, is tying the knot. Yet we know that you tie a knot. So the shaila is hagufa. What's the pshat in this knot that we're tying? Hooray, l'chayra, it's l'chayra nesa deraisa. That knot is going to be there. Seemingly, that knot's going to be there la'olam vad. L'chayra, because you throw this goat off the cliff, and then the knot is still attached to the goat. It's still attached to his horn. And there he is at the bottom until his murdered carcass is eaten by everybody, but they don't eat the rope. So that knot stays there. So this would be a raya to one of the tzadim in Hashayla. It doesn't say anywhere that you're only permitted to tie that knot because of the fact that Avodas Yom Kippur is Deicha Yontif or something. It doesn't seem to be. So from here, the Maldiskin says, maybe we have a raya from over here, and his lashon is, Titnu Chazal Yikshur Gam Ben Karnav. Chazal said you have to tie the knot. This kesher is never going to be opened. Sharei, he's going to go and fly down the mountain, and the knot is still going to be there. How is it that he's allowed to do this? And we'll ask more. According to the Rambam, that it's a malacha shein tzrich legufa. Let's say you'll say that to tie a knot like this, that you never plan an opening, is a malacha shein tzrich legufa. So the Rambam sheet is malacha shein tzrich legufa is chayiv. So then how in the world are you allowed to tie such a knot? So he says, Elamai, you see from over here that since you don't need the kesher to last more than 5 minutes, more than a day, that's not called the kesher shakayama. A knot that you just need in order to get to a certain place, and then you don't care that the knot should last, that's not called a kesher shakayama. It's a great chiddush because Kipshuta, you know that when you're tying this knot, you're going to have it lasting, but you don't care about the fact that it's going to last. So Mardiskin says, there's a raya from the Gemara in Yuma. The Maisa, how could you frag up the raya, Rabbi say? How you frag up the raya? How you frag up? No. What do you say? Because Rabbi say, who says when he's flying down the mountain, again, first of all, who says that they koshered? I don't know. Maybe they made a slip knot. Who says Bichlal? And a slip knot you could make loilam fud. I guess you're anyways going to have to answer this question because there isn't a moira, the Rabbi Yehuda, that holds that aniva is aser also. So no matter what, I guess you're going to have to answer this question of Rabbi Yehuda. So that's why maybe nobody wanted to say aniva. Maybe that's the shot. Rabbi Yehuda holds that aniva is aser loilam fud. So what are we going to gain to say that aniva is a knot according to Rabbi Yehuda? So what are we going to gain to say that it's an aniva? We're anyways going to have to answer up according to Rabbi Yehuda. But there's another answer, Rabbi Yisai. The answer is Pasha. And the Maldiskin already alludes to this possibility. He says, what do you mean? There he is. They push him off the cliff. No. What happens by the time he gets off the cliff? So then maybe also it's going to open up once it's, because the nituk, maybe it's going to snap in that spot over there. Tell him, what are you going to say? Who says that it's dafka going to snap in the makom where the knot is? Who says it's going to snap dafka in the makom where the knot is? Now, I must tell you something very interesting. Rabbi said the Mishabur brings down over here and Sivkat and Chav Gimel. If you snap let's say you tie a rope like this. Here, you tie a rope, just a regular rope. You tie a piece of string. You tie two ends together and you tie a knot. Okay. If you cut the string on the other side, not on the side of the knot, you cut like the cake box. Thank you, Rabbi Rosenberg. You cut like the cake box. If you cut the string, that string on the cake box is meant to be closed because people don't snap dafka in the place of the knot. Most people don't snap dafka in the place of the knot. They snap on the string. To snap on the string, the Mishabur brings down, that's called psikas talish, and that's mutter. You're allowed to snap a rope. Excuse me. You're allowed to snap a piece of string and cut open the string around the box. But you're not allowed, and this is a very big mitzvah, I think, Lefarsim. Mishabur says in Sivkat and Chav Gimel, if you tie a box with a string around the box and you make a double knot, you're not allowed to cut on the place of the knot because then you just did matir. You were menatik, right? What would happen if we were to cut this? It would snap open and you did matir. And that says the Mishabura is an isser. You're not allowed to snap on the place of the knot, even though it's not a mice of matir. You're not undoing it, but with your fingerlach and your toes and whatever. But it doesn't matter. Once you snap the knot, that's called menatik. Says the Mishabura, menatik is a matir. So my example of the cake box is a very good example. Maybe it's going to be very related to this shaila. Here's a rope that I tied. How long does he want that knot closed for? He wants it closed just for the time of when you get your cake. He doesn't really care because he knows afterwards you're going to snap the string. So this will be the exact same shaila. If you would have a raya from the Sir Lazazel, that when I put the string on the Sir Lazazel, so then it's something that was never made to be opened. It's never made to be opened. And Afal Piken, it seems to be mutter. So you see that we consider the fact that he's only doing it for the duration of the time that he needs the item. So then that's not considered a lo'ilam dikana. Same thing with the string around the box with the cake. How long do I need that knot closed for? I don't really need that knot closed until he gets the cake, until he gets into his house. Again, nobody is bedafka opening the knot, snapping it there. So that'll be the nafkamina. Am I allowed to snap the knot on the knot itself? Or do I have to cut the string, not on the knot itself? If you learn that, like the Maldiskin as a raya from the Gemara in Yuma, that when you take something and you tie it and you don't care that it should remain, that's not considered kayama. So then l'chayra, it should be mutter to snap the knot. But mashenkein, if you learn that no, there's no raya, because the Maisa, maybe Taka on the way down the mountain, it snapped. Maybe on the way down the mountain, it snapped. So you don't have a raya from there. So then you wouldn't be allowed to snap it on that knot. Now, Rabbi say you're still not allowed to snap it on the knot by the cake box, because saif, even if you say that it's not kayama, but it's still an uman's knot, it's still an uman's knot. So basically, it's a kesher agabe kesher, which is, even if you'll say, all we're saying is that when you have a knot, that I don't care that it's going to remain and I just need it for the duration until it gets to the garbage. So what you did is you still made an uman's knot. That's no question, Rabbi said. Nobody should make a mistake. The nidan of the achrayim, there's no question in the world, is that if you take a double knot and tie it on your garbage bag, you not zicher, but you're certainly over an isidra abanan according to the Shilti Gebayim. Because since it's a catcher uman, the only question is it considered la'olam? Were you over an isidra isa? But the uman aspect is there. What's an afkamina? The shviger. If you see the shviger tying a double knot on the garbage, or like Rabbi Fein is saying, let's say you see that they're tying, let's say, a knot and a bow on the garbage bag. So then that'll be the shiloh. Because here, that's not an uman's knot. A knot and a bow is not an uman's knot. So if you go with the tzad that it's not considered lo'olam, it's not considered a lo'olam tikkana. Why is it not considered a lo'olam tikkana? Because it's something I only need until it gets to the garbage. So then we're in business. It's gevaldik. It's a not uman's knot, and it's not a lo'olam tikkana. So therefore, it's gevaldik. It's not something that has any kiyum to it. So thus is the grace of Shaila. From the Gemara in Yuma, l'chayr there's not such a raya, but the l'chayr there's a Rashi mefurish that l'chayr it's a Rashi mefurish. Rashi in Sukkah and Davlam Gimel Beis, Rashi says Tana Rabbanan. It's talking over there about lulav and the eged on the lulav, and Rashi says that the Tana Rabbanan hutter agdoi b'yantif. Let's say a person on yantif, he comes, his lulav doesn't have an eged. His lulav doesn't, it's not tied around. Hutter agdoi b'yantif oikdoi ka'aguda shal yarak. So what do? So you have to take the aguda, you take the rope, and you go like vegetables. You tie around and around and around and around like this, and then afterward, you don't make any knots, but you just tie around and around and around, and then you're toichiv. Like we said, you just like shtup in, right? But you're not allowed to make any form of knot. That's what it says in the Gemara. So Rashi says, hutter agdoi, your knot came off on Yontif, and now you have to go and fix your knot. So Rashi says, oigdoi, bekricha b'alma, just wrap it around and then put it in. Yikreicha eged saviv yitchai v'reishai, and then put in one end into that which was wrapped around, like you wrap around vegetables. V'lo yikshar shnei haroshim ke'echad kishar ksharim. Don't make, where's the Gemara in Lamed Gimel Mebeis in Sukkah? Don't make a knot like this type of knot, a simple knot. Okay, why? So Rashi says the kesher kayama, because it's a kesher kayama, is an av melacha, and this is kayama. Why is it kayama? Says Rashi, she'enai chayshesh latiroi olamis. Says Rashi, because this knot you're never going to open. So Rashi's mefurish. Advice: how long do you make your knot on your lulav for? You make your knot on your lulav for the duration of Sukkot, right? But Rashi's saying, yeah, you make it for the duration of Sukkot, which is 7 days, 8 days, or whatever it is. But it says Rashi, but one thing is bara. L'chayra, you're never going to open it ever, right? You're never opening it up. Even after Sukkot, nobody opens up the knot, right? Maybe you take off the tabayis on a Shana Rabbah, but you don't take off the knot, and then it just remains, lo'ilam, whatever you wind up doing with your lulav. If you wind up taking your lulav and burning it or whatever. So this is a raya to Ashayla. I'm making a knot that I want to last for 8 days, but I'm never planning on opening the knot. What's the din of such a knot? Rashi says mefurish, that knot is called kayama oilamis. Kaven she'ena chayshesh latira oilamis. That sounds l'chayra like a garbage bag, lahavdil. That sounds l'chayra like a garbage bag. What's the case of a garbage bag? I tied the knot to get till the garbage, but I never plan on opening that knot. Right? So l'chayra, this Rashi would be a raya to the grace of Shaila, and this is why the Rivash in Kufchav Beis, he seems to go on this shaila exactly. What's the din if I have a knot? He says, you only need the knot for yontif, but you don't need to open up the knot. He says, and what are you going to wind up doing? Let's say you wind up saying after yontif, you want to take out the lulav. So what are you going to do? You're going to untie the knot? Of course not. You're just going to take out the lulav. You're just going to take out let's say you want to take out the adasim and put them in your besamim. So what are you going to wind up doing? You're just going to take out the besamim and put them nobody's going to start untying the knot. So he says, so that's called the kesher shekayama. And he brings a raya, it's called the kesher shekayama, because the Gemara brings down that a lady that has a tichel. So the Gemara says that maybe there would have been a tzad that when a lady has a tichel, the Gemara brings, I'll read you the lashon. The Gemara brings, ma'adatema, mishlef shalfalei. I would have a meaning when a lady makes a tichel, that she just takes off the tichel and doesn't undo the knot. So the Gemara says, Kamash Malon, that no, she does undo the knot. Why? Because she's afraid if she's just going to take it off without undoing the knot, some of her hairs are going to get ripped out. Right? It's a raya that the ladies used to have hair. Some of the hairs are going to get ripped out. So Mamela, that's why she's going to be, open up the knot. She's not going to go and leave the knot because she's not going to be kedai for her to take off the tichel with the knot, because then what's going to happen is inevitably that hairs are going to get ripped out. So therefore, she's going to, open up the knot. Okay. But what was the ma'havamina? Says Rivash, the havamina is that she goes and she leaves the knot, and that's why it would have been a problem. Okay. Because she's just going to take off the tichel and leave the knot in the tichel. So he says, over there, for sure, the kesher remains. The kesher for sure remains. When she's going to take off the kesher remains. And the Gemara havamina that's considered deraisa. So the Rivash understood, but she definitely doesn't want the knot specifically to remain forever. But Elamai, she just doesn't undo the knot. This is the words in the Rivash. I must tell you, I don't understand the Rivash, because maybe the case is that she always is going to leave that side of the tichel and keep the knot and bedafka. So why is that a raya to what we're talking about, where you have the garbage bag, or where you have the case of the lulav akapanim, that you're tying a knot and that you don't want it to remain, you just don't care if it remains, just the mela it's going to remain. So I don't know, but that's l'maisa what it says in the Rivash, and that's l'maisa the raya from Rashi. Now Rosh Zalman Auerbach in the Shmir Shabbos is extremely busy with this. He has in the Mincha Shloim on this in Chelik Beis and Siman Yud Gimel. He has in Siman Lamed Daled about this in Ois Lamed Beis. Rosh Zalman has in the Shmir Shabbos in Perek Tes in Archav Aleph. Rosh Zalman was very, very busy with this, and he wanted to be Mekel. Rosh Zalman wanted to be Mekel. The Maisa, the Chasam Sofer in Sukkah Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis. It's not so known. The Chasam Sofer goes on this shaila of tying the knot, and he discusses the shaila. And he says, when you tie a knot, the knot is going to be left loilam vad, and you're not going to open up the knot. So such a knot is going to be considered oilam thick knot, like Rashi says. So we saw from here is a raya l'chayra that if you don't plan on opening something, that's called loilam. Says the Chasam Sofer, no, it's going like a Tana, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda's sheet is that they used to be moirish their children and grandchildren, their lulavim. So therefore, the lulav was going to have a knot loilam vad. But there's no raya, he says, to a case of where they weren't being moirish. He says there's no raya. Rashi means because they're going to actually keep the bedafka, keep the knot loilam vad. L'maisi, look in Lashon Rashi. Rashi says she'ena chayshish latiroi lamis. Doesn't sound like that. Rashi's mashma, they don't plan on opening it. Rashi doesn't sound like they bedafka want to keep closed. Rashi doesn't say she fizeh shakayama. The makbid, the lashiroi. Rashi says she'ena chayshish latir because they don't plan on opening it. Rashi sounds like that. That's l'chayda. So Rosh Zalman Rabbi say he wants to say maybe there's no raya from lulav, because he says a lulav is maybe different than a garbage bag. Rashi Zalman says that Rashi l'chayda does sound like if you have a knot and you plan on keeping it just for 8 days, but it will be l'olam void, that is considered l'olam. He said there's still no raya maybe to a garbage bag. Why? Says Rosh Zalman, by a lulav, it has a shame knot. By a lulav, when you tie a knot on the lulav, because of the din of Zekei Livanvei and the din of Eged and lulav Tarich Eged, and there's an Indian to be Ma'aged, and there's an Indian to put together your lulav with a knot. So it has a shame knot. Elamai, you're trying to figure out what sort knot is this? Is this a knot that is a lo'ilam dikanat? Is it a mugbal zman dikanat? So Shlomo Zalman says, so since you want the knot, and it has a shame knot, and the Chazal gave it a chshivas of a knot, to go and bedavka put together your lulav al yedei knot, so the fact that you're not going to open the knot means that you're not going to mafkia from the shame knot which is there. He says, Ulam yesh laden efshar ein dezaym lulav. Sham ikar rotzen is the kesher, because the lulav tzarich eged, because that kedav anveyu, and therefore the kesher is done for the mitzvah. Mibli, and he's not planning on opening it. So then if he doesn't plan on opening it, so then he's not uprooting the shame kesher. But Masha'en Kain, he says, when you have a garbage bag, so there, he says, the whole entire knot has zero chshivas of a knot. The whole entire knot is not a purpose of it being together. The whole entire purpose of the knot is to enable me to get to the garbage. That's his svara. And therefore he says, so maybe it lost the whole entire shame of the kesher. But this is a great chiddush of Gaon Shlomo Zalman. Shlomo Zalman is learning that by a lulav that it has a shame knot, he's taking two parts and putting them together. By a lulav, it has a shame knot. So since by a lulav, it has a shame of a knot, so then we could say this svara that if he has no intention of opening it, so nothing was ever mafkia from the shame knot, as if to say he agrees somewhat to the svara. If he doesn't ever plan on opening the knot, so then we say it has a shame knot and he never plans on opening it, so then it has a chshivas of a lo'ilam type of a knot. But Masha'en came when you have a knot, which is a knot by knot, it's no chashiv at all, because you don't plan ever on really having it together. You don't really want the garbage bag to be together. You just don't want it to open. So then we're going to be misyaches to the fact that he doesn't really care, and that later on he wouldn't care if it opened, and that shows that his entire intention right now is just to get it to the garbage. But this is grace chedushim, Rabbi Yisai, such grace chedushim. The nafkamina, like we said, is the cake box that has the string on. Again, nafkamina number one is to go and tie a double knot on a garbage. You can't do anyways, because no matter what, it's an uman's knot. It just might not be an uman's knot lo'ilam, but it certainly is an issa d'rabbanan. Elamai, to go and tie a knot and a bow on your garbage. So I definitely don't suggest it, because there is a svara to say it's being done lo'ilam. Certainly is not suggested. If the shviger does it, so then mistama, it's not worth the marriage. And I guess it'll be soymech on this svara that Shlomo Zalman is saying, that doesn't have a tachlis of being a oneness. It really doesn't have a shame kesher, but it's such a big chiddush. And the cake box with the string, again, to go and snap it b'dafka on the uman's knot is a very, very big problem, because over there, it's a knot al gabe knot, it's a kesher al gabe kesher. So typically that you're not allowed to open a kesher al gabe kesher. So even if you're going to say that it wasn't an issa deraisa, but it's still an issa derabanan because it was an uman's knot, so you can't snap it on that, even though it might not be deraisa, even though it might yes be deraisa, like we're saying, because this far is not so simple, but it's still going to be at least a derabanan. What were the comments, Rabbi said? What were the comments? I missed the comments. Yeah, so to tie one knot on the garbage bag, just to tie the two legs together, that's okay, because that's a kesher echad, which is mutter lo'ilam vod. That's okay. Now with this hakdama, I'd like to start today a very geshmaka topic. Excuse me, very geshmaka topic, which I think there's a lot of confusion on this topic. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. I think there's a lot of bilbil on this topic. And this is the sugya of a knot that's tied by mistake. Now, by a show of hands, first of all, why is everybody's screen off? I don't like talking to black boxes. These black boxes don't matter. I like talking to human. What's going on over here? Just let me see all your ugly faces. I don't understand what's going on over here. What is this? I'm talking to a bunch of ugly people here. What is this? Right? Let's go ugly, one by one. Let's go. Right? But you see what I have to deal with? You understand this? What is this? What is this? It's bad enough. I'm not, every person that brings me a shaila, he puts a little envelope by the door. I feel like I'm at Saira. Oh, tazai, ugly faces. Here we go. Oh, tazai. I still see there's some ugly people. Philip Rosenberg is trying as fast as he can to put on his Unterhosen and everything. Let's go. Friedlander, Baruch Hashem, at least he's only showing us the top. Let's go. Here we go. Danny, you believe what kind of ugly people I have to? Danny's also not here. Okay, now we start the Geshmak Sugya. Here we go. There we go. Okay, all my ugly friends. Where's my ugly Frankel? Where is this? Rabbi Schwade, Rabbi Rosenberg, get your ugly faces on the camera. What is this, you ugly? Oh no, is this being recorded? Danny, we're gonna have to do something about this. They're gonna be called, you're gonna be known as the ugly Kyle Atazai. Thank you. Ugly Frankel. Atazai. Thank you. Atazai. Got you all. Okay. Atazai. Okay. Rabbi Josephic. Okay. Rabbi Frankel, you missed me, right? Good boy. All right, let's go weiter. Okay. Now we start a new topic. Now that I see all of your ugly faces, now we can start the topic. Let me get it. So now this is the sugya, which by a show of hands, I think most people, there's very split hashkafis about this. Are you allowed to untie a knot that was made b'toyis? Accidentally, I think this is one of those things that, everybody talks about. Are you allowed to tie a knot? Are you allowed to untie a knot that was made b'toyis? You know how it goes. You're tying, you're untying your shoes, you pull the string. Here, let's do it right now as a visual over here. Oh no, where'd my string go? Here she is, right? You're tying a knot by mistake here. There's a good example. Let's say you're making a shoe and you have like this and it comes out like that. How could it happen? So that's how you see it happens. So you're pulling out the string and you don't realize, and then all of a sudden it just comes out. Whoop, you got a knot. Just like Houdini. So now, are you allowed to untie this knot on Shabbos? By show of hands, what do most people think? I think that most people think that it's mutter. No, Rabbi Singer? What do most people think? That if you have a knot that was tied, you don't know. You don't know. You just joined the religion a few days ago. It's a little difficult for you. Rabbi Spitz, what do you think? If you have a knot that was tied, I don't know. That's why you're here in the Kailul. Okay, here we go. What do you say? Rabbi Khan says it's mutter. Rabbi Moyle says it's mutter. Right? Who else? What else do we have here? Rabbi Khan says it's mutter. Right? Somebody just wrote to me, everything is mutter. Okay, so let's see. What's Lamaisa? Right? So Lamaisa, if it goes back, Rabbi Isai, to the Chazanish in Nun Beis and Sif Yud Yud Zayin, and I saw a lot of the Kitzis Farim bring this down, like it's the Aseres HaDibros, that a knot that was tied by mistake, a double knot, like we just described, not a regular knot, but like a double knot, the knot of the Shulti Gibayrim, when you take this knot and it was accidentally made, you didn't bedafka do this, but you took a bow, you undid the bow, and it turned into a double knot. Says the Chazanish, this is my yisoid. What's the Chazanish's yisoid? That the whole entire din of a knot on a knot, the Shulti Gibayrim's chumrah of tying a double knot, the Shulti Gibayrim was the one that told us that if you tie a double knot for under a day, that we have to be machmir and consider it to be an uman's knot. Says the Chazanish, I have a raya from the Gemara that's not true. The Gemara talks about Elisha tying her tichel, and she was tying a double knot, and it seems to be that it's mutter. So it's Mefurish Gemara that to tie a double knot for under a day is mutter. So what's the Shulti Gibayrim doing? He's going against the Gemara. The Gemara's a raya brura that a tight double knot is going to be mutter. So why does the Shulti Gibayrim say it's aser? Zok the Chazanish. The teretz is Avada is not arguing on the Gemara. Just we have a minig to be more machmir than the Gemara. So the Chazanish says we're not going to say that minig b'makom tsar. That's how he explains what we said yesterday. He says we're not going to say that minig b'makom mitzvah. We're not going to say that minig. Says the Chazanish b'makom that it was tied the mela nasa kesher. If the knot came by mistake, there's no such minig. So this. A lot of the Kitzis Farim went with this. They took it like the Aseres HaDibros, Rabbi Isai, and they all write that therefore a knot, the person is untying his shoe and it turns into a double knot. So they all say it's mutter gomer. You don't need tsar, you don't need mitzvah, you don't need anything. If when you pulled out the aniva, it turned into a double knot, it's mutter gomer. That's what's b'shem the Chazanish. We'll see if it's not so simple in the Chazanish, but that's what they say b'shem the Chazanish. And the Chayra, they say it like the Aseres HaDibros. Now, Rabbi Isai, let's go back a step. The Mishnah Berurah in Sivkat in Chav Gimel seems to also say something similar to this. The Mishnah Berurah in Sivkat in Chav Gimel says, now, granted, Rabbi said the raya of the Chazanish from the Gemara is not the worst thing. The Gemara, the Chazanish says, I have a Gemara Mefarashes that seems to say that if you tie a double knot, Medina the Gemara, it's mutter. So obviously we're just being machmir. So Lemaisa Rabbi say, you could learn, like we said already many times, you could learn that first of all, maybe it's talking in the Gemara about a knot and then a bow on the knot. And that's why the Gemara took on Pashit, that the lady is going to be allowed to take it by Yom. Maybe it wasn't talking about a double knot. There's nowhere in the Gemara that it says it's talking about a double knot. So I guess what the Chazon Ish means is that the normal metzias of a lady making a tichel is that she made a double knot. Okay, but Rabbi say, why can't we say that the double knot that she made was like this? It was loose, it wasn't tight. Who says that it was tight? And that's what we said the whole time. That's why you're allowed to tie your belt. That's why there was a minhag of tying the tichel, because it wasn't tight. So the raya of the Chazon Ish against the Shulti Gebarim from the Gemara, I don't know. The Shulti Gebarim doesn't sound like that. The Shulti Gebarim says we don't know, and therefore we are machmir. He doesn't say therefore we have a minhag. He says therefore we're machmir on all double knots. So let's assume that the raya of the Chazon Ish is not muchrachas, which gives us a right to dan the shaila. And we'll see it's also, when we see inside the Chazon Ish, we'll see it's not pashut at all. The Mishabura over here in Sivkat and Chav Gimel, Mishabura says, Umikol makayim im darkai laseis aniva, says the Mishabura, if this person was making a bow, and beloy kavana, without a kavana, he accidentally tied a kesher, nikshar. So says the Mishabura, dinai ke kesher she'asir lahatir b'kol yoyim. This knot has the din of a knot, which is made to be opened every day. What's this knot? What's this knot? So it seems like what the Mishabura is saying is that the person was tying a bow and he planned on tying a bow. The case of the Mishabura is the fellow was tying a regular bow. A bow would have been mutter for him to tie for 7 days. It would be mutter for him to tie for 7 years. While he was tying the bow, he accidentally turned it into a knot. Says the Mishabura, don't think that knot now is a din of a 7-year knot. Let's say he was tying a bow for 7 years. So then that would be mutter. Now, accidentally, when he tied the bow, it turned into a knot. Says the Mishabura, these are the words in the Mishabura. Don't think that knot has the din that will take the knot and put it together with his kavanah. His kavanah was 7 years. The knot that he made was a real knot. Don't think it's called a knot. That's a 7-year knot. The words in the Mishabura are, it's considered a knot that's meant to be opened by Yom. Those are the words in the Mishabura. Comes again the Machzeleyo, Rabbi Falk, and he brings down what's the pshat in this Mishnah Berurah. This seemingly sounds like from the Mishnah Berurah that this would be considered like you didn't plan on making this kesher. It's a kesher that's tied shaloi b'kavana. So therefore, it has some type of a kula. A kesher tied shaloi b'kavana, it has some type of a kula. We know if you have a knot that was tied for a week, that would be aser. But here, it's not going to be considered a knot that's tied for a week. Those are the words in the Mishabura. So the Machzeliyo, Rav Falk, Zechrein Levroche, he brings down in Chelik Aleph and Siman Mem Ches, he says, you know what the pshat in this Mishabura is? The Mishabura is based on a Mogen Avram. This Mogen Avram, we learned together in better times when we were together in the base Medrash. But what can you do? We have to do Chazar, even though we're not together in the base Medrash. The Machzeliyo brings that the Mogen Avram is talking about a bencher that a piece of wax fell on. Those days, they used to use fancy people with electricity. Who's fancy people? They used to use wax candles. So sometimes the wax would drip, and it would drip between 2 pages, and it would stick the 2 pages together. Over there, says the Mogen Avram, that when you take 2 pages that had a piece of wax that are sticking 2 pages together, Zok the Mogen Avram, that's not considered koireya. We know that sticking together the paper with wax is toifer. It's like gluing, which is like a tolda of toifer. So to unglue, to unstick 2 pieces of paper together should be called kareya. Says the Mogen Avram, it's not called kareya. Why is it not called kareya? Zok the Mogen Avram, he doesn't say that much words, but he says, nidbeku dapim badodi, if they got stuck together with wax, kevan deloy bekavana, since it was not with kavana, it's not doimet to toifer. It's not like toifer, and it's mutter to open it up. And therefore, says Machzeliyo, that's the pshat in this Mishnah Berurah. Just like over there, a piece of glue that fell and stuck these things together is not considered that there's a chibur. It's not considered that there's a oneness. It's not considered a oneness. Why? Because it wasn't planned on being a oneness. It's something that happened on its own. So too, a kesher that was tied on its own. When you tie a knot and you didn't plan on tying a knot and it happened on its own, that's not a kesher. That's the psak of the Machzeh Eliyahu, the great Rabbi Falk, Zecher Tzadik Levracha. If you learn like that, so then it means that any time a knot is made unintentionally, it's not a knot. It's a knot bar knot. And such a thing is going to be mutter to open on Shabbos. That means that if you make a double knot in your shoe, this is not like the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish said the pshat is because we have a minig, and the minig is a double knot we're machmer on. We're never going to be machmer on a double knot, says the Chazon Ish, in a case of where it was done accidentally. But the Machzeh Eliyahu, Falk, is saying a much greater kula. He's saying any knot. Any knot. He's not just talking about a kesher agabe kesher. Any knot that was tied by mistake, right? Any knot that was tied by mistake, even not a kesher agabe kesher. Such a knot is not a knot. Why not? Because it's like the case of the 2 pages that were stuck together by accident. The mitzias of chibur, of connection, is when something is done b'dafka. If it's something is not done b'dafka, so then that's not considered a connection. It's only considered a connection when you take 2 pieces of paper and you b'dafka glue them together. If it happened on its own, it's not a chibur. We don't see it as a chibur because it's not something that you planned on doing. Who had been a kesher? If a kesher was done, that's how a Falk learns. Boisai, you all know how much by me, Falk, my Rabbi Zechron Levracha, what a great person he was, and what a great poisik he was, and what a tremendous Talmud Chacham he was, and what a tremendous tzaddik he was, and what a tremendous Yeshemayim he was, and how much the world suffers that he's no longer in Olam Hazeh, and that he's basking in the glory of Olam Haba. Aval man noimar, man adaber, man tzaddik, nach b'set recheinu v'nach kaira. L'chayra, this is not the pshat in our Rebbe, the Mishnah Berurah. This is not the pshat in the Makor of the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah is coming from a Chai Adam. And man noimar, you have to say the emes. L'chayra, it's not the pshat. First of all, in the Magen Avram itself, if you look in the Magen Avram himself doesn't say what Rav Falk said. The Magen Avram does not say that when you take 2 pieces of paper together and they got glue stuck between them by accident, it's not considered a chibur. He doesn't say that. He says, the emes, why is it that when I take glue or wax and I put 2 pieces of paper, why is that toifer? Why is that toifer? Toifer means a stitch. The answer is it's tolda of toifer. It's a tolda of toifer. It's doimet the toifer. So on the tolda of toifer, on that which is doimet the toifer, says the Magen Avram, it's loidami to toifer. If when a piece of wax falls on its own, so then that's a svara to say that it's not doimet the toifer. That's first of all, because the only time that you can say it's doimet the toifer is when I'm coming to take the 2 things and put them together. Then you can say it's doimet the toifer. But on the av itself, on a stitch itself, never would anybody say this. If a stitch got stitched on its own, of course it would have a din of a toifer. You have nothing from the Magen Avram. And therefore, who had din a kosher, we have no reason to believe on the av that we would say such a svara. On the av itself, that's a kosher. If something got tied into a knot, that's a kosher. That's number 1, before we go into the Etzem Mishnah Berurah. But more so, Abba Yisai, is that the chayra, it's not true what's taking place over here. Over there, a piece of glue or wax got stuck between 2 pieces of paper and stuck the 2 pieces of paper together, and it happened memela, it happened on its own, it happened to b'li kavana. And therefore, you could say, therefore, he didn't want the entire mitzvahs of the chibur, and therefore it's not doimet the toifer, and therefore we don't see it as a connection. We see it as something, we don't see these 2 things together. Abaisa, over here, what's the case that the Chai Adam and the Mishnah Berurah are talking about? They're talking about a person that was, yes, trying to put 2 things together. He was trying to do an aniva. He was trying to put these 2 things together. He was, yes, trying to. But what happened when he was putting these 2 things together? It says the Mishnah Berurah, Mikol Makam in Darka Latzas Aniva. If he tried to make an aniva, and I'll read you from the Chai Adam, who's Myrich a bit more. The Chai Adam says, he says, a kesher that's made to open up every day, he said, that's allowed. That's allowed. He says, but some say you shouldn't make double knots, like we explained, and it's only mutter b'makom tsar. He says, let's say you have a knot, which is not the derech to open up every day, like the k'toinis shemachlifim mishabbos l'Shabbos. They used to have some type of a clothing that they would make a knot from Shabbos to Shabbos, not a double knot, a knot with a bow or whatever, a knot. He said that's aser, because that's the Rabbanan. But let's say what you were doing was the right thing. You had something on your spitzel or whatever, and you were making an aniva on your spitzel. And what happened when you made the aniva on your spitzel and you planned on that aniva being there until next Shabbos? So let's say you were making the aniva on your spitzel and it turned into a knot by mistake. But you wanted it together. You wanted both parts of the spitzel to be together. You wanted this leg and that leg to be connected. And it accidentally turned into a knot. That's when we have this heter. But then that's not like Rafal, because Rabbi Sai over here was talking about he does want it together. It's not doimet to the case over there where he has the 2 pages that he doesn't want together. So first of all, the case of the 2 pages together, there is a special svara that it's no longer doimet the toifer, but it's not a svara in the Av Malacha. So who says we would say it by the Av Malacha anyways, and that we would say that svara by kosher? And number 2 is that it's not even true. Here he does want it together. He wants it together, Ayidei and Aniva. But what could you do? It turned into, by mistake, into a kosher. So the Kahai Gavna, we don't have that svara of the Mogen Avram. Here, the knot was formed and he wants it to be together. Just what? He didn't want it to be together in the form of a knot. He wanted it to be together in the form of a niva. It's not doing it in the case of the 2 pieces of paper that he doesn't want it together b'chlal. So what's Mr. Pshat the Mishabura? Read the words in the Mishabura. He tells you what the Pshat is. Read the words in the Chayadam. He says, listen closely, Rabbi Isai, if when I was making an aniva, by mistake, what came out was a knot. So he says, that knot has a din of a knot, kesher she'asu lahatir b'kol yoyim. He doesn't say it doesn't have a din of a knot. Rafal told us it doesn't have a din of a knot because you don't want it together. It does have a din of a knot. He doesn't say that. Mishabura says it is a knot, but it's a knot that's meant to be opened every day. What does the Mishabura mean? Nifla. The Mishabura is talking about a person that planned on making an aniva. And what happened when he planned on making an aniva for 7 days, like the case of the shpitzel. And what happened when he planned on making the aniva for 7 days? It accidentally turned into a knot. And then now we could look at this and say, so he made a knot, which is meant to be together for 7 days. So therefore we should say that knot has a din of a knot, of a 7-day knot. Says the Mishabura, no, don't say that. It has a din of a knot, which is meant to be opened during that same day. Why? What's the logic? Gewaltige logic. Because we don't reckon with the das of the 7 days, because the das of the 7 days was for something else. It was for an aniva. That which you made was a knot. The knot you never planned on making. So we can't take the knot and put it together with your 7-day knot, das. So what das then does this have? This has the das of a person that never would want such a knot. So that's like a knot that's meant to be opened by yoim. So what's the nafkamina? Givaldik. Nafkamina is now what type of knot was formed. If the type of knot that was formed was not an uman's knot, I'll give you an example. I take an aniva, I go like this, and as I'm pulling it through, I go, oops, it's about to turn into a knot. Now look at this. It's a loose knot. This is not an uman's knot. So then what is this? Until the Mishnah Brura, I would have said it's a loose double knot. Until the Mishnah Brura, I would have said, a loose double knot that he planned on making for 7 days, so you're not going to be allowed to open it. Because it's like any knot that was planned on being open for 7 days. Kums again, the Mishnah Brura, and he says, no. So the Mishnah Brura, it's a knot, but we don't give it the shame of a 7-day knot because he never planned on this thing being for 7 days. He planned on something else being for 7 days. So then it's a knot which is meant to be opened that day. So if it's not being opened that day and it's not an uman's knot, Zaktim Shabrua, that's what you're allowed to do. But what would happen if accidentally when I was doing the aniva, it accidentally turned into a tight double knot? So then what is that? It's a tight double knot which is meant to be opened that day. So what's the din of a tight double knot which you meant to be open that day? So the answer is it's asa to open. It's only mutter b'makom tsar. So therefore, all of the kitzas svarim that write that if a knot was made b'toyis, it's mutter without a cheshbon to open it. L'chayra, lefi the Mishnah Brura, this isn't true. According to the Mishnah Brura, if you make a tight double knot by mistake, so then they can't write according to the Mishnah Brura that you're allowed to open up that knot What they have to write is that you're allowed to open that knot b'makom tsar, or they'd have to write you're allowed to open up that knot b'makom mitzvah, or they'd have to write that if it's a not a tight double knot, then it'll be open mut the gomer to open up that knot. But you can't write the words that if you have a tight double knot, that it's mutter to open without any cheshbon, without any tsar, without any mitzvah, without anything. And Rabbi say it's muchach in the Chai Adam beyond a shadow of a doubt. How do I know in the Chai Adam that this is the emes? Because the Chai Adam has a sefer called the Zichru Teiros Moshe. In the sefer Zichru Teiros Moshe, he has, it's like a sikum of halachas for Hilchos Shabbos. In Ois Aleph, he brings down the halacha we just mentioned. In Ois Aleph, he brings down the halacha we just mentioned, and he says that when you're tying a bow and accidentally it turns into a knot, so he writes these words. He says, "V'mein derech lekoishra iraklo says aniva." If your derech is to make an aniva, ubeloy kavan a nixture, and by mistake it turned into a knot, it's mutter to open it. Why is it mutter to open it? Now in Sif Aleph of the Zichru Teiros Moshe, at this point he never spoke yet about the chumrah of the Shilti Gebarim. He didn't even speak yet about the Shilti Gebarim's chumrah, that any double knot is considered to be a uman's knot. He didn't even speak about it yet. So it's muchach in the Chai Adam that this heter that we're talking about has nothing to do with the double knot svara. Here he's saying a svara, like we explained before, that when you have intention of a niva, and by mistake it turns into a knot, we do not connect your time das of an aniva, which isn't what you created. We'll look at the knot and we'll say, if she's not an woman's knot, it's considered a knot that was only meant to be for the day. But we'll don it based on, is it an woman's knot or not? Then later on in Sif Gimel, he brings down the fact that you can't make a double knot because that's a Maisa Uman. And also the Mishabura is muchach like this, everybody say. Why does the Mishabura bring this in Sif Katan Chav Gimel? Why doesn't he bring this in Sif Aleph over there where it talks about a knot on a knot? The Torah says the Mishabura has nothing to do with the double knot here, Rabbi Yisai. The Mishabura is telling you a yisaid. The yisaid is if you try to make one thing and something else came out, and this is not the thing that you tried to make, so then we do not take your time, the das of your time, the hagbala of their zman, the amount of time, klape, this new item, because this is not the item that you planned on making. So if we'd ask you, how much time did you plan on making this thing for? You'd say, I never planned on making this thing. So there's no time involved at all. So that's called a knot that's meant to be open boy by yoim. So now we look at the knot in that situation. If it's a tight double knot, we'll say, oh, so it's a tight double knot that was meant to be opened within 24 hours. So then it's still usher, unless it's makom tsar, like we saw yesterday. And if it's not a tight double knot, it's not an uman's knot b'chlal, so then we'll say, okay, so you accidentally made an aniva and it turned into an aniva al gabe kesher or something like that. So then we'll say, the fact that in his original mind, he planned on doing it for 7 days. He planned on making an aniva for 7 days. He never planned on making this for 7 days. So then we're going to say you're allowed to open it by bayoyim. And the nafkamina is like I said, let's say I'm tying an aniva. It's a very common case because a person chaps, he's undoing the aniva. And while he's undoing the aniva, he doesn't realize what's going on here. As he's undoing the aniva, it turns into a knot. And then he chaps it right at the point before it's tight. So now you planned on it being an aniva. In the end, what came out? In the end came out a knot, but it's not a tight knot. So then you'll be allowed to undo it because it'll be a loose double knot, which is not considered for a week or for whatever. It's considered under a day because that chelik of your das is not binding. This Rabbi say is a emes amita shel Torah. It's the pashut words in the Mishnah Berurah. And the Chayra does it halacha l'maisa. So it comes out halacha l'maisa. If somebody accidentally made a knot, and it should it comes out all the time. The kids they're taking out the shoelace, and it comes out a double knot. So now, generally, we might have a heter here. Because the problem is the kid comes to you, he tied it so, he's pulling and pulling and pulling, and he's making the knot worse and worse and worse, right? So now, if you're able to just slip the shoe off the kid's foot, so that's what you have to do. And if the kid has a different pair of shoes, you have to put him on a different pair of shoes. But most people, they just think, oh, no, it's a knot that was made by mistake, so it's allowed to be open. Where does it say that? It doesn't say it in the Mishnah Berurah. Elamai, you want to say, but Lamaisa, we can be saimich on the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish does say it, right? But you know what? I don't know. The Chazon Ish is a very big chiddush over here. Listen to the words in the Chazon Ish. All the kids as far they bring down that if it's an indiscriminate knot, you're allowed to open it. If it was a mistaken knot, you're allowed to open it. Look at the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish says, Kosev Mishtabura, he brings the Chayadam, and he says, V'nasa Kesher, it's like a Kesher she'ena shel kayama. It's considered a Kesher she'ena shel kayama. Ratzaloymar, even if it was made on Erev Shabbos, right? So he writes like this. The Chazon Ish says, he brings down what we mentioned because the Gemara is mefurish fakert. So he says, Vaday ein kan minig bezeh. There's no minig if something was made memela. And then he writes, Kol shekain, if there's tsar and mitzvah. It doesn't sound like the Chazon Ish really wanted to be saimich on this by itself. It sounds a little bit like the Chazon Ish is saying that, like, Kol shekain, if there's tsar, I'm just saying, in the Mishnah Berurah, it's borrowed that the Mishnah Berurah is not saying this halacha specifically on a double knot, because he does not bring it in Sif Aleph, and the words in the Mishnah Berurah are clearly not like that. He says any aniva, which turns into any knot. He's not talking about dafka, the double knot. Then the halacha is it has a din of a knot, which is asi lahatir b'kol yoyim, that we just don't reckon with the time thought that the person had, because this isn't what he planned on making. So upon him, it's borrowed from the Mishnah Berurah that if the kid comes to you and he has a double knot and you're able to slip off the shoe, you have no right to undo that knot. You have no right to undo that. If the kid comes to you and he's got a tight double knot and, he's mamish bitzar and he's not going to be able to get off the shoe and he's going to fall asleep and you won't be able to take it off. So then that's a makom tsar. So, okay. So we know that for sure there's a makom to be makel, that a double knot you could open, but makom tsar. But I just think that the Welt thinks there's a straight pashut heter that when something was tied by accident, it's mutter. And that Rabbi say, I must tell you, is bichlal not pashut. So let's make a sikum. We saw a tremendous amount today, Rabbi say, tremendous amount. One is that when I want to know in the garbage bag that you're tying the knot on the garbage bag and you don't care that the garbage bag should remain closed. You just want to get it to the garbage. So there seems to be a raya from the Gemara in Yuma that that's what they were doing by the Sir Lazazel, and it didn't seem to bother anybody. And it seems to be it was mutter. But the raya is not muchach because maybe taka, the string would come off as the animal was being falling down the mountain. It's not such a muchaktik raya. It's also not a raya that they made a knot. The raya brura l'chayr is from Rashi and Sukkah. Rashi and Sukkah says mefurish that they would tie the lulav with an egged around the lulav, and that lulav egged you're definitely not keeping on l'olam. And afal pikein, it's considered a l'olam tikanat, meaning you're not going to bedafka undo it. You're just going to leave it there, but you don't care. And that Rashi says is called l'olam. So too by the garbage bag, Rosh Zalman wanted to make a chilik and say there is different because there's a knot. It has a shame of a knot. Mashenka, the garbage bag, you don't really want it to be there. You don't care about the knot. You just want it to be closed. That's Lemaisa, Kipshuta, you have to be machmer in this shaila. Anyways, you certainly can't make a double knot because the only shaila of a double knot would make it that it's not a deraisa. It would knock it down to derabanan, but it would still be a derabanan. The question is, if your shviger is tying a knot and a bow and then she's bringing it to the garbage, do you have to tackle her at the 50-yard line? So that l'chayra is totally in this shaila. I would use other reasons to tackle her and not this, because maybe she could be saimech on Rosh Zalman, but definitely you shouldn't do it. If she says to you, tie it, don't just leave it with one knot. It's not going to last. Make a bow or something. So you tell her that, don't you know that even the Maral Diskin only dan studim, but he said it's a moch shein shrich lekufa, and she's going to tell you, yeah, but the Chasam Sofer said taka that the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda that they were moirish to lulav and lebneihem. You tell her Chasam Sofer, who says we pass like Chasam Sofer, Rivash is mefurish, not like that. You tell her. Then afterward, the cake box. She tells you, do me a favor, snap off the string on the cake box, right? And then she tells you, but do it by the knot. Snap off the cake box string by the knot, bedafka, right? Tell the knot, what are you talking about? The Mishnah Berurah Tzivkotim Chav Gimel brings down that knot was meant to be closed loyal, but same fight again. She's going to say, what do you mean? It wasn't, man, I don't care that it's closed. I just need it until the box gets open. But Lemaisa Baisa, anyways, you tell her, what do you mean? It's an uman's knot. So I can't snap it at the uman's knot because then you're snapping it at the point and that's considered a matir. So I can't snap it there. You snap it somewhere else. Then afterward, the kid comes to Bubby and he's got his shoelace untied and whatever. And she right away, she says, no, because all you have to do is take out the knot. You tell her, why can't you just take off the shoe? Why do you have to go and do that? She says, what do you mean? It's a knot that was made b'toyis. You tell her what? Because nish is a big chiddush. Mishaburis is not like that. The Mishaburis says that it has a din of a knot. It's only a knot that we don't have the din of the zman. It was made to be open, the kivyachol by yoyim, but it's still an uman's knot. She says, yeah, but the kid is screaming. He's inside. Tell the kid screaming because you didn't even try to take it off of his shoe yet. But if you take it off, it might be enough. She tells you, what are you going to do? The kid's going to wear weekday shoes. It's going to be terrible. What's going to be? And okay, that's already a big shayla. But I don't know if a kid, it makes so much of a difference. By us, if your shoe gets tied into a double knot or something like that by accident, and it's going to be big tsar because you're going to have to wear your weekday shoes, and your weekday shoes are for some oversized basketball player, who knows what. So then that's going to be busha, and Taisus and Shabbos says that it's a big busha to walk outside with funny looking clothing or whatever. So then that would be the heter of a double knot, the makim tsar. B'yat Hashem, we'll continue tomorrow. Let me see all your faces now. Let me see all your faces. Frankel, you're back with us. No games. All right. Who's over here? Who's with you in Shalom Yankiv? Who's over there? How many guys are over there? What's going on here? Rabbi Rothenberg? Rabbi Rosenberg, your chavrusa is a little bit shorter than you, don't you think? Who's over here? Where's Rabbi Shwade? What's he hiding for? What is he hiding? What does he think? He's better than us?